pastime in space? Favorite way?
Favorite pastime? Probably, I would, if I, believe it or not, we actually did work up there. But, you know, I enjoyed the stupid astronaut tricks, I call them. So, you know, physics is really fun in zero G. You can do all kinds of neat things. And so, a couple of things we did on one of my flights. This was I flew my second flight with John and Glenn. And a couple of things we did on that flight. One of them was we flew a big in-flight maintenance toolbox with a bunch of tools for the shuttle. And one of the things we flew was a power screwdriver. And so I pulled that power screwdriver out. This was like flight day 1, I think. And I got to thinking, so we had a long 1/4-inch extension. So I put this 1/4-inch extension on it and a pair of vice grips on one end. And I had Kurt Brown, I said, hey Kurt, get on that end. And I'm going to get on this side. And we got aligned, and then I pushed the button. And we, you know, at first it was kind of slow because there's so much torque, but it started wrapping up, and we just started spinning really fast, and to the point I almost made myself sick. And so that was a fun one. Another one, we on that same flight we had what's called Space Cab, which was a laboratory in the payload bay. But to get to it, it's about a 30-foot tunnel that was pressurized that went through the payload bay to get to it from the mid-deck. And so there was this long tunnel, and then at the end of the tunnel, they had these two handrails that were like this. And this was late in the flight, and I looked at those handrails, and I looked at that tunnel, and I said, you know, if I wrap some bungee cords around these handles, I can grab those handles, put my feet into that bungee cord, and I can launch myself down that tunnel. And so, but here's the thing you gotta remember about zero G. Like if you ever, you know, when we throw a ball to each other, like play catch, you don't realize it, but you're always lofting it every time because the gravity is causing it to drop. But when you're in space, that doesn't happen. If I throw a ball to you like I would on Earth, that ball's going to go shooting over your head. And so you have to get used to that. For this time I was experienced enough to know better, but when I loaded myself on that little catapult, I actually lofted myself a little bit, and there was these bulkheads, and I took a high-speed heel strike on both heels. I thought I broke my heels, but then I went back and perfected my technique. But then the day before it drove a burn, another of my crew members came floating out in the mid-deck, and he came out, and his forehead was all bloody. And blood or water just kind of sticks to you because surface tension just kind of sticks to your head. And so he comes floating out like nothing's happening and said, hey, so Stevie Ray, what you been doing? As it turns out, he had done the same thing, except he hit one of those bulkheads with his head. So I ended up with this big gash, and because it was a high visibility flight with John and Glenn, we're talking to the president on telecom, we're doing all these press conferences, and we took great pleasure out of telling every crowd about what he did to his head. Anyway.
Yeah, there are a lot of stupid astronaut trick things that you do. But physics is wonderful, playing with anything water, all kinds of different things that perform differently. Taking something that's a funny shape and spinning it and then watching it just change direction, which I still don't understand how that happens. But things like that are interesting. But by far, my favorite thing to do was to look out the windows, to look back at the Earth. It's gloriously beautiful. The multiple shades of blue of the oceans, the browns and the greens and grays of the continents. And when you pass over someplace like Africa, where there's a lot of desert, and you've got the deep blues of the seas and the oceans nearby, it is just so beautiful. And the strange land formations that you see in the convolutes in the earth, or even some of the larger deserts, you can see the sand dunes and how they look. And it's just so much fun to sit there and watch the earth go by and see the earth.
Absolutely.
It's just beautiful.
And he's right, that's really the pastime of everybody. You can get used to zero G, but you never get tired of looking at the earth. And like looking out at the atmosphere, at the Terminator, realizing how thin it actually is. It's just so thin. And I can remember one time looking at it, certainly in the sun. sun was kind of going down, and seeing separate colors associated with the different levels of the atmosphere. I remember counting 8 different colors on the Terminator. It's just incredible. And you also get an appreciation for, damage that's being done in places like the deforestation in Brazil is just bad. And you see that, and it kind of turns all of us into a little bit of an environmentalist after you see that stuff.
It reminds me of a story that I was going to tell earlier about the beauty of the Earth. On my very first, before my first flight, before I was selected as an astronaut, I watched the movie The Dream is Alive. If you've seen that, it's a pretty spectacular movie about the shuttle. Yeah, it was pretty good. And one of the scenes in there, it shows the payload bay doors of the space shuttle open, and they're looking out as they open up, and it shows the glorious Earth below. And when I first saw that, I said, I've got to do that one day. And sure enough, got to space. Very first time, very first day, we had just gotten to orbit, and we were unstrapping. I was ready to look at the Earth and have that moment, and it was dark. And I hadn't experienced enough to know that there's a lot of great things to look at the dark Earth too. So I said, oh shoot. I went down to the mid-deck of the space shuttle to help people take their suits off and put everything away, and did a bunch of switch changes and things. And so 30, 45 minutes later, I drift up to the flight deck where all the big windows are, and I'm going to do something, and all of a sudden, I see out the window the Earth below. And I just stopped at the window, and I stuck my nose up there in the window, and I'm just watching the Earth go by, and I don't know how long I did that, but finally our commander, Fred Gregory, said, Jim, get back to work. I had just totally stopped doing anything except gawking out the window. It was so beautiful.